November 12, 1944. A nameless village on the swampy coast of Morotai, Dutch East Indies. The air is thick, a wet blanket of heat that smothers sound. Cicadas drone in a ceaseless high-pitched thrum, a sound of anxious waiting. For weeks the world has been nothing but this sound, the gnawing emptiness in the stomach, and the whispers. Inside a small hut, its thatched roof damp with jungle rot, a young woman named Akiko holds her son, Kenji, so tightly he can barely breathe. His small, frail body trembles against hers. Akiko's eyes are fixed on the cracks in the bamboo wall, watching slivers of the outside world, a world that is about to end. The whispers have promised it. They came from the retreating soldiers of the Imperial Japanese Army, their faces grim, their voices hollowed out by defeat. They spoke of the Americans, the replacements, but they used a different word, a more terrifying word: Kokujin, the black men. The propaganda posters, plastered on buildings in the larger towns, had shown them as beasts, fanged monsters with dark skin, snatching women, their eyes glowing with demonic rage. The officers had reinforced the stories. They were savages, they said, devils pulled from the deepest jungles of America, undisciplined, more animal than man. They would not take prisoners, they would burn everything. The black devils are coming, the whispers had warned. Hide your daughters. It is more honorable to die by your own hand than to fall into theirs. Akiko can hear them now, not the whisper, but the reality. It's a low, grinding growl that vibrates through the packed earth floor, the sound of engines, the deep, guttural cough of heavy trucks chewing up the muddy track that passes for a road. It is a sound of immense power, of a world she cannot comprehend, and it is getting closer. Kenji begins to cry, a thin, hungry whimper. Akiko presses a hand over his mouth, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Every instinct screams at her to run, to flee into the dense, malarial jungle, where snakes and starvation offer a slower, more familiar death. But where would she go? Her husband is gone, conscripted and vanished into the meat grinder of the Pacific War. Her village is a ghost town of women, children, and old men, all slowly starving on the yams and roots they can scavenge. The Imperial Army took the rest. They took the rice, the chickens, the dignity. Now, the devils were coming to take what was left. The grinding of the truck stops. There is a new sound, the creak of metal, the heavy thud of boots hitting the mud. Then voices, deep voices, speaking a language that sounds like stones tumbling in a riverbed. It is the language of the enemy. Akiko risks a glance through the crack. She sees them. Tall figures, their skin the color of polished mahogany, drenched in sweat. They wear green fatigues and steel helmets that obscure their faces, making them anonymous, terrifying. They carry rifles, long wooden M1 Gardens that look brutally efficient. They move with a tired, practiced economy, their movements heavy in the oppressive heat. They don't look like monsters. They look like men. Tired, wary men. But the fear, planted and watered by weeks of relentless propaganda, chokes out all reason. These are the men she was warned about, the pillagers, the savages. An old man, braver or perhaps just more foolish than the rest, steps out of his hut, bowing low, his hands held up in a gesture of placation. A soldier turns towards him. The soldier is huge, a mountain of a man. He shifts his rifle. Akiko flinches, expecting the crack of a gunshot, the end of a life.
The shot never comes. Instead, Akiko hears a soft thud, a metallic clink. She forces her eyes open, peering again through the sliver of bamboo. The giant soldier, a corporal by the stripes on his sleeve, hasn't raised his rifle. He has lowered it. He is looking at the old man, who is still frozen in his bow. The soldier says something again. This time his voice is lower, less sharp. It's not a command. It sounds questioning. He nudges something in the mud with the toe of his boot, a small olive drab can, a sea ration. He had tossed it on the ground in front of the old man. This is a trick. It must be. A cruel game before the violence begins. But the soldier just stands there, his shoulders slumped slightly with exhaustion. He watches the old man for a moment, then turns away, rejoining his squad as they begin to set up a perimeter. Another soldier, younger, with a tired kindness in his eyes, walks past Akiko's hut. He sees the flash of movement as she pulls back from the crack. He stops. Akiko's blood runs cold. He is looking right at her hiding place. She can feel his gaze boring through the thin wall. He could splinter the bamboo with a single kick. He could empty his rifle into the hut in seconds. She waits for the end, but the soldier, Private First Class Samuel Jones of the 93rd Infantry Division's 25th Infantry Regiment, does not raise his weapon. He had seen that look before, not here, in the humid jungles of the Pacific, but in the sweltering cotton fields of Alabama. He had seen that terrified, cornered look in the eyes of people who expected nothing but pain from a man in a uniform, or simply from a man with his skin color. He sees the abject poverty, the skeletal thinness of the villagers, the hollowed outlook of profound hunger. This isn't a nest of fanatics. This is a graveyard of the forgotten. Slowly, deliberately, he unslings his M1 Garand and leans it against the side of a nearby truck, a gesture of peace understood in any language. He reaches into the large pocket of his fatigues and pulls out something small and rectangular, wrapped in brown paper, a Hershey's chocolate bar, his last one. He crouches down, placing it gently on the ground a few feet from the hut's entrance. Then he backs away, his hands held up, palms open. He gives a small, tired nod and walks on, disappearing behind a GMC deuce and a half. Akiko stares at the offering. Chocolate. She hasn't seen such a thing in years. It is a treasure beyond imagining. Her son, Kenji, has never even tasted it. The smell, faint but rich, wafts into the hut. Hunger is a powerful, primal force. It can overwhelm fear. It can silence propaganda. Hesitantly, she pushes open the flimsy door. The village is quiet. The soldiers are busy with their own tasks, setting up tents, checking equipment. They seem to be ignoring the villagers completely. She scurries out, a wraith in worn-out clothes, snatches the chocolate bar, and darts back inside, her heart pounding. Inside the darkness of the hut, she unwraps it. The smell is intoxicating. She breaks off a tiny piece and gives it to Kenji. His eyes go wide as the sweetness floods his mouth. For the first time in months, a real smile, not a pained grimace, touches his lips. Akiko watches him, and something inside her, a knot of pure terror that has been tightening for weeks, begins to loosen. All around the village, similar scenes are playing out. A soldier shares a can of Spam with a family. Another offers a cigarette to an old man who accepts it with a trembling hand. A medic from the 318th Medical Battalion tends to a child's infected leg sore, cleaning it with supplies that are more valuable than gold. There is no pillaging, no savagery. There is only a quiet, weary compassion. The Black Devils have come, but they haven't brought hellfire. They have brought food. They have brought medicine. They have brought a kindness so unexpected, so profound, it feels more shocking than any act of violence could have been. The whispers were wrong. The posters were a lie. And for Akiko and the other women of the village, a terrifying new question begins to form. If these men are not the devils, then who is?
The days bleed into weeks. The 93rd Infantry Division settles into the monotony of garrison duty. Theirs is not a glorious frontline battle. It is the unglamorous, back-breaking work of mopping up, of securing an island already won. They build roads, clear minefields, and stand guard against the scattered, desperate pockets of Japanese soldiers still hiding in the jungle, men as forgotten and starved as the civilians. For the soldiers of the 93rd, this is a familiar story. They are a segregated unit, often relegated to labor and support roles, fighting a two-front war, one against the Japanese Empire and another against the prejudice within their own army. They are used to being treated as less than. Perhaps that is why they see the Japanese civilians not as a faceless enemy, but as people. A strange and silent routine begins to form between the occupiers and the occupied. The GIs learn that the wail of a baby at midday means a mother has no milk. The women learn that the rumble of the supply trucks in the afternoon means the soldiers might have extra K rations to share. Language is a barrier, but humanity finds a way. A soldier, a staff sergeant named Marcus Thorne, who was a mechanic in Detroit, fixes a woman's broken water pail with a piece of scrap metal and some wire. She thanks him with a deep bow and a handful of strange, bitter roots she had dug up, the only payment she can offer. He accepts it with a solemn nod, understanding the value of the gift. The children are the first to bridge the gap completely. Fear is an adult disease. Curiosity is the realm of the young. Kenji, Akiko's son, is drawn to the soldiers. He watches them clean their rifles, their hands moving with practiced ease. He mimics their marching, his small legs pumping, much to the amusement of the men. One afternoon, a corporal named Henderson sits Kenji on his knee and shows him a worn photograph of his own son back in Georgia, a boy with the same wide, curious eyes. Henderson doesn't speak a word of Japanese. Kenji doesn't speak a word of English, but they understand each other perfectly. Akiko watches these interactions with a heart full of warring emotions. Gratitude, sharp and overwhelming, is foremost.
These men, these devils, are the only reason her son is still alive. The extra food from their mess kits, the occasional can of peaches or corned beef, has brought a flicker of life back to Kenji's hollow cheeks. The soldiers have given them blankets, soap, even quinine for the fevers that sweep through the village. But beneath the gratitude lies a deep and profound shame. Her own people, her own government, had abandoned them. The imperial army had stripped them bare and left them to die, feeding them lies about the honor of suicide. These strangers, these enemies, have shown them more humanity in a few weeks than their own countrymen had in years. You must understand the totality of their abandonment. The Japanese war machine was collapsing. Supply lines were shattered. On these remote islands, civilians were the lowest priority. They were considered expendable. For the women, survival was a brutal calculus of finding the next meager meal. The arrival of the 93rd changed that equation. Suddenly, survival wasn't just a desperate hope. It was a daily reality provided by the very men they were supposed to fear and hate. A bond forms, forged not in friendship, but in a shared, unspoken understanding of suffering. The soldiers of the 93rd knew what it was to be marginalized, to be judged and hated for the color of your skin. They saw in the starving Japanese a reflection of the poverty and desperation they knew from home. In this remote, forgotten corner of the war, two groups of outcasts, two sets of people deemed lesser than by the powerful, have found a fragile sanctuary in each other's company. But it is a sanctuary built on the shifting sands of war. And one evening, a new sound drifts through the village, the excited chatter of soldiers reading mail, a rumor spreading from the supply depot down the line. New orders. The rumor is a single, devastating word: Okinawa.
The word spreads through the village not as a rumor, but as a sentence. Okinawa. Even the most isolated villagers know the name. It is the next great battle, the final stepping stone to the Japanese homeland, a place of unimaginable violence and death. For the soldiers of the 93rd, the news is met with a grim mixture of emotions. For some, it is a chance to finally get into the main fight, to prove their combat readiness, to escape the tedium of garrison duty. For others, it is a terrifying prospect. They have seen the 1,000-yard stare on the faces of Marines coming back from places like Peleliu. They know what awaits them. Sergeant Marcus Thorne cleans his M1 Garand with a furious, methodical energy, his mind not on the weapon, but on the faces of his wife and daughters in a faded photograph tucked inside his helmet liner. This quiet life, this strange peace, is about to be shattered. For Akiko and the other women, the news is something far more immediate and terrifying. It is the end of their world. The fragile ecosystem of survival they have built with the American soldiers is about to be dismantled. Their protectors, their providers, their unlikely saviors are leaving. Who will replace them? Another American unit, perhaps? One made of white soldiers who might not share the 93rd's unique perspective, who might see them only as the enemy. Or worse, what if no one replaces them? What if they are simply abandoned again, left to the mercy of the jungle and the starving, fanatical Japanese holdouts who would see them as traitors for accepting enemy aid? The fear, which had receded into a dull background hum, returns with a vengeance, sharp and piercing. The atmosphere in the village changes overnight. The easy, unspoken routine is broken. The soldiers are busy now, not with the simple tasks of daily life, but with the urgent preparations for war. They pack crates, service their vehicles, and stockpile ammunition. Their faces are harder, their movements more abrupt. The laughter that used to echo through the camp as they played with the children is gone, replaced by the terse, clipped language of military orders. The women watch from a distance, their faces etched with a familiar, hollow dread. They no longer approach the soldiers for food. They feel like beggars again, their brief period of dignity evaporating in the humid air. Akiko holds Kenji, who seems to sense the change. He no longer runs towards the soldiers, but clings to his mother's leg, watching the frantic activity with wide, confused eyes. Akiko sees the young Corporal Henderson, the one who showed Kenji the photograph of his son. Henderson is loading boxes of mortar shells onto a truck, his movements powerful and efficient. He catches Akiko's eye for a brief moment. There is no smile, no gentle nod. There is only a look of deep, profound sorrow and resignation. He is a soldier. He has his orders. He is going to another place to do a terrible job, and she and her son are part of a life he is already leaving behind.
The final morning arrives shrouded in a gray, oppressive mist. The sound begins before dawn. It's the sound that brought them here weeks ago, the deep, rumbling cough of the GMC truck engines turning over, one by one. But this time it is not a sound of arrival, it is a sound of finality, a sound of departure. The entire village is awake, standing silently outside their huts, watching the long convoy of green trucks line up on the muddy road. The soldiers, loaded with gear, climb into the back of the vehicles, their faces grim and shadowed under the brims of their helmets. They avoid looking at the villagers. It is easier that way. The bond they formed here was real, but it was a complication war has no time for. The truck's engines idle, spewing diesel fumes into the damp air, a countdown to abandonment. Akiko feels a desperate, primal panic rising in her chest. They cannot go. They simply cannot. To be left behind now is a death sentence. The kindness they were shown has become a cruel joke, a brief taste of life before the executioner returns. The first truck in the line lurches forward. The convoy is beginning to move.
It starts with a single cry, a raw, piercing wail of pure desperation from an old woman near the front of the village. It is a sound that tears through the morning mist and the rumble of the engines. Then another woman joins in, and another. It is not a sound of anger or protest. It is the sound of absolute, bottomless grief. Then they begin to move, not away from the trucks, but towards them. At first it's a hesitant shuffle, then a walk, then a frantic, stumbling run. Akiko, gripping Kenji's hand, is swept up in the current of despair. She doesn't know what she is doing, only that she must do something. She cannot just stand here and watch her son's only chance of survival drive away into the jungle. The soldiers in the backs of the trucks stare in disbelief. Their first instinct is to reach for their rifles. A crowd of locals running towards a military convoy is an ambush, a threat. But they see the faces of the women they have shared food with, the mothers of the children they have played with. They are not carrying weapons. They are carrying only terror in their eyes. Their hands are empty, outstretched, pleading. The convoy picks up speed, churning mud from the road. The women become more desperate. They run alongside the trucks, their bare feet slapping in the slick mud. They reach out, their hands grabbing at the tailgates, the canvas covers, the arms of the soldiers sitting near the edge. They are clinging to the vehicles, being dragged along, screaming words in a language the soldiers do not understand, but in a tone that is universally, heartbreakingly clear. Onegai, ikanaide. Please, don't go. We need more. Please, don't leave us. Akiko reaches the truck carrying Sergeant Thorne's squad. She sees his face, his eyes wide with shock and a terrible, helpless pity. She holds Kenji up, a desperate sacrificial offering. Please, she screams, the single English word she has learned. Please. Her fingers scrabble for a hold on the rough wooden sideboard of the truck bed. The vehicle is moving too fast. Mud splatters her face, mixing with her tears. Thorne looks down at her, his face a mask of conflict. He is a soldier under orders, a cog in a vast and indifferent machine. He cannot stop this truck. He cannot save this woman. All he can do is watch as her grip slips, and she falls back into the road, pulling her son to her chest as the convoy rolls past. From the back of his truck, Private First Class Samuel Jones watches the scene unfold. He sees the women, some on their knees in the mud, their faces streaked with dirt and tears. He sees the children, crying in confusion and fear. This chaotic, weeping mass is the legacy of their kindness. They hadn't come as conquerors. They had come as human beings. And in doing so, they had made the departure, the return to the cold logic of war, unbearable. They had not just given these people food and blankets. They had given them hope. And now they were taking it away. He looks at his fellow soldiers. There are no stoic, heart-bitten warriors here. There are just young men, their faces ashen, staring back at the human wreckage they are leaving in their wake. They had been called devils, but their sin, it seemed, was not cruelty, but a compassion the war had no place for. The trucks round a final bend, and the village disappears behind a curtain of dense green jungle. The sound of the women's cries fades, replaced once again by the drone of the engines and the ceaseless thrum of the cicadas. The 93rd Infantry Division is on its way to Okinawa, to a battle that will sear itself into the memory of the world. But for the men in these trucks, another image will be forever burned into their minds. The sight of women clinging to their vehicles, begging them not to go. Not because they were soldiers, but because for a brief moment in the middle of a world at war, they had been kind. It was a surprising, heartbreaking testament to the fact that sometimes the most profound wounds of war are not inflicted by bullets,
but by the devastating, fleeting promise of a better world.